being that it is a very, small group and intimate group, I think that we're going to be able to accomplish a lot, certainly answer all of your questions, Andrea, and kind of hear some good stories. If you didn't hear me talk, obviously we have Brian on the line as well. So I've known Brian for several years now. He's the owner and I'll call him the general manager running H&K Luxury Travel. His client list obviously is very extensive. He's made it through this this pandemic, and he's been around for quite some time, and he specializes in finding those hidden gems. And he's in the process of putting together two very nice vacations for myself and my wife, and then for myself and a couple clients that are coming up in the fall. So I certainly trust him with the planning of our events, and I would suspect that you should certainly trust him with yours, and I would call him the expert on travel, especially at this stage of the game. So don't want to steal your thunder too much, Brian, but why don't you give us a little bit of a quick history, and then we'll hop into that story that I think we all want to hear at this point, and then we'll dive into some Q&A.
Okay. Well, I'll tell just kind of briefly, kind of tell about two things that have happened in our industry that have shaped the industry and are still in some ways shaping the industry, including the recent events of the last 14 months, which has been a big shaper of our industry. But the biggest one prior to this, so I've been in travel now for going on 17 years. I've owned my agency now going on, 10. I can't believe that. 10 years now. And right before I came into the industry, literally 20 years ago, there was a company that came on the market that changed the landscape of travel forever. And if you can't guess what that company is, it's good old fashioned EXPEDIA. I can't say the word. It's like cussing, and I don't want to say any vulgar things today. But that came on the market, and what it did, and for Andrea's purpose, and even Anthony and Louise, the thing that it changed was it exposed something that had been going on in the industry from the time travel agents came into being. It exposed fees, and not that they were bad, because Expedia did a great marketing job of making it out that if your travel agent had ever charged you a fee, they've been double dipping into the payment realm on how they're booking your trip. And they acted like the fee was a criminal act almost. So their biggest, if you remember, and still today with Expedia, one of their biggest marketing ploys is to always talk about no fees, no fees. They're a travel agency. They're a travel agency now, like so many of us, where they have a headquarters somewhere, but you'll never see it. They have a call center somewhere, but nobody ever really knows where it's at. And because it's a combination of call centers here in the US and in India and in a lot of places overseas, but they're travel agents, and it's actually Expedia is a licensed travel agency. So when they came out and said travel agents have been double dipping, charging fees, you have to always remember that back in early 80s, all through the 80s, if you walk down Main Street, you saw, small town USA, you saw at least one or two travel agencies, and you go by and look in the window, and they had the big posters, Paris and Disney and cruise ships, and you'd go in to talk to them, and they would plan your trip, and then they would talk to you at some point about how they're going to be compensated via a fee. And they had to do that because back then travel agents were literally in all brick and mortar. They were going into an office, they were paid in some cases hourly wages, some cases salaries, but needless to say, the owner of that agency had a gigantic amount of overhead. They had to pay for all the overhead of the brick and mortar itself, but then they also had the employee benefits and everything. And that's how they paid, because they were getting commission from what we call our suppliers. And a supplier is a really loose term because it means even such as an airline or a hotel, tour operator, a person who just does excursions. Those are all quote unquote suppliers in industry. And they all pay commission. And they used to pay commission to travel agents to basically say, thank you for recommending our company to your clients, because I know that there's competition out there. So Expedia came in and basically said, boy, if they're charging you a fee, they're ripping you off. because now you can go on our website, do all the work yourself, plan the trip yourself, and hit the book it button and not pay the fees. But what Expedia always, in essence, lied about, and that we're a little off topic, but I figure since we only got the four of us, I'll kind of tell the story, and then I'll come back to why it's relevant even today. Long story short, it made travel agents reevaluate their model. So many of them got out of business because when they took the fees out, when Expedia basically made clients go, you know what, I'm not going to pay you anymore to plan my trip. I'm just going to do it myself online. It caused a lot of mom and pops to lose their agencies. It caused other mom and pops to say, you know what, we got to transform. So they went into the home office model. And here we are today. I'm, as you can see, I'm sitting in my home office, and 90% of agencies, barring some really big ones that have been around, like Liberty Travel in New Jersey has been around forever. Pro Travels in all around New Jersey, and they've got offices and brick and mortar and things like that. AAA is a insurance as well as a travel agency, and they still have brick and mortar. But when all the agents basically said, you know what, since we're having a hard time charging fees anymore, we can't survive only on the commissions from our suppliers. So we're going to have to take that overhead away. And so a lot of agencies like mine, I've got agents in Tennessee, I've got agents in Missouri, Oklahoma at certain points. And all those agents basically work for me as an independent contractor, but we're all home-based. So that kind of eliminated the fee aspect. So now we're really on a level playing field with Expedia, even though they still try to discredit us from the standpoint, they don't understand why you're going to use a travel agent. And we're not going to get into all the reasons to use a travel agent, but that was such a big turning point. And here we are now, fast forward 14 months ago, and where everything was coming back, the travel agent actually was making a gigantic rebound over the last 5 to 10 years because Expedia had its own problems. People were on hold in Mexico for 4 hours trying to get through to a call center because something wasn't right with their reservation. And that personal touch came back in. And all of a sudden the pandemic hit, and boy, we lost a lot in the last 14 months. A lot of travel agencies couldn't make it again, especially if they were still that old brick and mortar model. We went from X amount of business literally in 30 days to zero on the books. Nobody anticipated that kind of shift. So that's where we are now as an industry, but it's also created the ability for all of us to stay in business to where we can still now come out of this pandemic and still offer our services and everything to our clients. And in some cases, even more clients are coming to us because they had maybe some bad experiences when they had to cancel their trip last March, April, May. And if they didn't have a travel agent, because all my clients, all they had to do was send me an email or a phone call and go, Brian, we're canceling. And I'd say, okay, I'll take care of it. And I would spend the next 2 to 3 hours on hold with suppliers and have multiple phones going on if I couldn't do it online and cancel their trips. And I would literally just send them an email later and I go, you're done, you're canceled. Your refund's on its way, or your credit's on its way, or whatever it is. So they were like, wow, had I had to be on the phone, that would have been a total disaster. And so that's kind of the good news coming out of the pandemic, is it's given us some credibility again. It's kind of raised us above the bar and made people go, you know what, we should really reach out to this person, because and we don't ever want to see that happen again. And we pray it never happens again. But if it does, it's nice to know you have somebody who's going to do all that hard labor for you and advise you correctly, which brings us all the way here to even the hard labor of understanding, where can you go? And that's the $1 million question everybody's asking us now, is where can we go? And the answer I'm going to tell you today most likely will change tomorrow. And it'll then change again after that. And so everything I'm telling you today is very fluid. I can go back, and if we just kind of reverse again and go back and rewind to about September, October, November of last year, your choices were pretty much Florida, Montana, parts of Texas, not really, but yeah, you could go if you wanted to, and Mexico and Dominican Republic and Costa Rica. And I say those were the three that were really the destinations for anybody to go, because they were the ones that said, we're going to open up and we're not going to require any testing for you to enter our country. And that was a big thing, because as countries were starting to talk about opening their tourism back, even on such small percentage scales, we saw a lot of hesitancy of people wanting to go out of the country, knowing that they were going to have to rely on testing to be the catapult, whether they could go or not. And especially the way testing is being done and the way testing is being required for so many countries. Some countries say it has to be done within 5 days of arrival. Some are 3 days before arrival. And it can't be before and it can't be after that. So if you had a test that you went and did before their time, or heaven forbid, you missed it by a day, you literally were getting to the airport and people were being turned down to go. I'll tell you one quick story related to that. And this is not the story I was going to tell you, but this shows you the gravity of what happened with all that testing requirements and why Mexico, Costa Rica, and Punta Cana were such big hot destinations and still are. I had a client that was supposed to go to Nevis. Actually, I had two different clients supposed to go to Nevis at about the same time. And one, when she heard about the testing, she got a little nervous and said, we're going to cancel. So they canceled right off the bat. The other one was like, you know what? We're going to go. We've got a nice little villa I helped them reserve in Nevis. And they were excited for their little break. At least it was getting them, nobody had gone anywhere practically from March until December. And they were just so excited to go somewhere. And they get to the airport at Newark. They walk up to the United ticket counter, and United tells them, I'm sorry, you've been rejected to get on the plane today. This is literally like December the 22nd. We're going to be over there festive. So they're at the airport. United says, you can't board. We have a notice in our system that says that you've been rejected by St. Kitts and Nevis. And they're like, I'm sorry, what are you talking about? We got our test. We submitted everything online. We did the test exactly the way that the right cycle test, the PCR or the antigen, they have these test requirements, right? And they get to the airport and they're told they can't go. So they actually get a hold of somebody at the Nevis Tourism Board, strange enough, in their airport. And meanwhile, I'm getting a text going, Brian, we got a big problem. And I'm sitting here, just the only client I had scheduled to have travel from literally March until December was now in the airport being told they couldn't go anywhere. So come to find out, their test was done through, oh my goodness, I'm going to forget the name of, what's the biggest test company in our country? LabCorp, I think, is one of them. Everybody uses LabCorp, right? So they use LabCorp. The guy at Nevis says, you used a company that's not in our list of approved testing facilities. And he's like, yeah, it is. And he goes, no, you use LabCorp. And he goes, it's in your testing. You go online and look. The guy looks and then goes, oh, I'm so sorry. We made a mistake. We should have told you this actually 4 days ago or 3 days ago, when we could have fixed it. They're at the airport. They've already been declined. And the tests were thrown out. We canceled the whole trip. Their entire holiday festive was over in about 20 minutes.
Wow.
I was pretty much, that's why the tequila's gone. I got drunk that night really bad, but no. So that was how the opening and closing, or the opening of countries, was affecting our travel. And which is why we didn't, even though people are going, oh, I hear tourism is open, I hear this country is open. That didn't necessarily equate to a gigantic rush of people wanting to go out of the country. Except when Mexico saw all the problems that we were already seeing. Jamaica was another one. Jamaica, they're down there going, I don't think we're going to do anything today. And because they were getting people that were submitting their tests and they just weren't getting back to them. And people were literally at the airport going, are we going or not? Because Jamaica hasn't told us if we're going. And so all of a sudden you'd get this email for a client literally an hour before their flight that says, oh, you've been approved. Oh, you can come on down. And they're at the airport, are they supposed to get excited or not? Right. So hallelujah for Mexico and Punta Cana and Costa Rica, because they basically were like, we can't afford to watch all of the people that want to come to our country get turned down because of this testing problem. So they open their borders, or they open their tourism anyway, to no test requirement whatsoever. Boy, did we see, it was like all of a sudden a skyrocket graph of business from like the 1st of December until about the middle of January. And then our wonderful government decided it was time to squash that just a little bit. And they came up with, well, I don't care if that country doesn't require a test, we're going to still require you to test to come back. And
well, they started doing it at the hotels, right?
what's that?
Don't they start doing it at the hotels down in Mexico and everything to help
Yep,
alleviate?
yep.
Yeah.
That was where Mexico was extremely smart, because they said, all right, not only are you going to have to take a test, but we're going to do the testing for you in your room. We're going to get your results within 24 hours and we're going to pay for it. Because some countries in the Southern Caribbean were saying, we're not going to pay for it. The test is about $250 a person. And again, you won't know the results till we actually test you once you arrive. And who knows what kind of testing they're using. You know, is it going to be a false positive and blah, blah, blah. So just that uncertainty caused travel to really dip again about mid-January to the 1st of February, because people are like, there's no way we're going to wait and plan a trip to get excited about, and then only find out literally the day before we're going that we can't go. But people were still going to Mexico, Punta Cana, Costa Rica, because they were like, well, at least we're on vacation. And here's where my advice to people was probably maybe a little different, because I no matter how bad things get, I'm never going to try to go, well, we need, you know, tell my agents, we need business, right? You need to be booking trips. We got to do something. And there, when you get into that mode, you start making mistakes and you start not advising which is best for the client in my business, right? So I decided that we were going to have to be extremely forthcoming and really talk about the pros and the cons of what this testing requirement is to come home. So I lost a lot of business in January because I was actually advising people out of going, because I kept telling them the problem with the testing when you're in country is if there is a false positive or a positive, doesn't matter. False positive doesn't matter. You're going to, as long as you're not sick, you know, heaven forbid. But if you're in Mexico and you test positive, you got to go back to the resort for 2 weeks, quarantine for 2 weeks. And most of the resorts, Louise, you made a point about Mexico was like, yeah, we'll do the testing at the resort. We'll pay for it. They're even offering to pay for the quarantine. So it's not costing the person an extra 2 weeks. But so here's where all right, I'll tell you the story. And this is a funny story to me, and you don't hate me by saying it's a funny story to me. All right. Because I have a good client who's booked a lot of trips to me in Tennessee. And she reached out to me in December and said, hey, my son's getting married. I want you to plan their honeymoon. So, okay. So I get them on the phone. I get the nice young couple on the phone, and we're starting to talk about their honeymoon. And I'm telling them, I don't think you should go to Mexico right now, because everything was new with the whole testing to come home thing. I said, maybe we should look at a Florida trip or somewhere domestic for now, and then plan that honeymoon or that anniversary trip, big blowout when everything finally gets back to normal, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, are you sure? Because we really want to go. And I said, no, I can't in good conscience advise you to go to Punta Cana, Mexico or Costa Rica right now with the way things are. I go, I'll book your trip if you want me to, but it's not what I would do from a honeymoon, because I don't want you to end your honeymoon on a really, really bad note. And I didn't know this, but apparently they didn't like my advice. So they had gone to another travel agent and booked the trip. I didn't know this. So my client, the mom, calls me last week, and I saw she called several times and didn't leave a message. And I'm like, what is going on? And she goes, oh, we got a big problem, Brian. I said, what's the problem? She goes, well, my son's at Secrets Maroma right now in Mexico. And I was like, Secrets Maroma? And you know, I'm 50, I'm gonna be 53. I'm thinking, did I just totally forget that I booked their trip? Is that how bad I've gotten right now? I've never booked a trip that I've ever forgotten about, but in the back of my mind, I'm having a cold sweat moment. Did I book their trip? How did I book the trip and they get to Mexico and I had no idea? So she goes, and I'm really sorry, but they didn't use you, and they went to another travel agent who booked their trip. And I said, well, that's fine, but I don't know how I'm supposed to help you now. She goes, well, he's in Mexico, and my daughter-in-law just tested positive to come home. All right, I'm trying not to, don't think evil of me, the two people that don't know me on the call very much, because I didn't laugh on the call, because oh, that's terrible. This is sad, but still, I don't understand what you want me to do. And she goes, well, they're back in the room. They've got them locked in their room. They had no ocean view. So they're literally sitting in their room looking at nothing for 2 weeks. She goes, but the biggest problem is they won't even do their laundry at the resort because of the quarantine, and they ran out of clothes. So the mom was asking me if I thought she should go to Mexico and take 2 things of luggage for her son and her daughter-in-law. And I was like, no, don't go to Mexico. As soon as you walk into their room to hand them the luggage, they're going to go, oops, you just got exposed. Get in there, because now you're going to have to quarantine. And now you're going to have 3 people quarantine in Mexico that you're not going to come home for 2 weeks. So that was kind of it's not really ha-ha funny, but it was actually quite funny to me to watch that happen. But so that's the pitfalls of travel with what's open right now. And that includes Mexico. It includes every country in the Caribbean that is technically open. There will be testing required to come home, and the same pitfalls that you can have in Mexico could be the same pitfall you'll have in Aruba, St. Lucia, Anguilla. It doesn't matter. That testing requirement's been a bit of a thorn in our side. We're curious because we're not hearing a lot of people testing positive, which is great news, but we're still concerned because naturally that thwarted the demand a little bit.
So, Brian,
Yes, ma'am.
question. So it's no different now, like for people that are vaccinated?
Countries are really struggling. Well, yes, countries are really struggling because they don't know how to verify a lot of the vaccinations yet. Little Caribbean countries like even Jamaica, which is more on its own, and they don't have the budgets to come up with their electronic version of what the EU is doing with the vaccination passport. And between cards, do you take your vaccination card with you? Where do you verify that at? Do you take a picture of it and upload it to their website in their country? So a lot of the countries are still saying vaccination means great, you can come in. Now you don't have to test to come, but our country's requirements to get home are still pretty stringent on the whether it's vaccination or not. So, and the airlines were instructed early on that they have to check. The airlines are the ones policing this. It's not anybody in the governments in Mexico, Punta Cana, Costa Rica. It's actually the person at the counter when you walk up and hand them your passport and your ticket to get on your flight. And so there hasn't been a lot of consistency with that yet. So that's the current situation of pretty much anywhere in the Caribbean. You can go almost anywhere. It's just a question of, do you have to test pre and post or just post to come back home? And that still varies because like Aruba, you can go to Aruba and they'll do a temperature check and a test there with rapid results. But if you test positive, naturally, they're going to come get you and put you in a quarantine hotel. But even their requirements to get in are different than the requirements to go to like Turks and Caicos or Jamaica and other countries that have on their website that you have to take your test. They give you all the specifics where to go as far as the acceptable labs, the type of test it has to be, because all the countries aren't the same, whether it's a PCR or if it's an antigen or for the other types of tests. And I'm not a test expert, so if I say those names wrong, please don't shoot me. But all of those countries have varying differences on even getting in. Really the only consistency right now is getting out and coming home. So now that's this half of the world. Europe, you're going to hear on the news that Europe is opening. You might hear things about France and Italy and Spain especially. Yes and no, they're opening. They're really opening only to EU passport holders right now. The American tourists outside of Greece and maybe Croatia are not welcome yet. They're working on that. And they're working on that because the EU has been putting together their vaccination passport for the last 6 months without any collaboration with anybody in the US, as far as we know. So they have their version of the EU passport for EU tourism, but there's not a version yet to allow US vaccinated passengers to come over there with that same type of electronic passport. So that's what they're trying to figure out. When does that happen? When are they going to officially let all vaccinated Americans come to the EU versus non-vaccinated Americans? When are they going to allow non-vaccinated, and what the parameters will be about their testing or their documentation? They've not figured that out yet. The only thing they figured out was Spain said, we're going to allow British people now, which was the big news like yesterday and the day before. But then Great Britain is warning their people not to go to Spain because they don't want them to go to Spain. Portugal came out and said they were the first one in that whole area to say, we're going to open up, but you have to wear a mask on the beach. You have to wear a mask no matter where you go,
Yeah,
but
so
even on the beach.
that's the big thing that I always see, because I am Portuguese, so, and I do have that citizenship. So we were toying around with going this summer because we were supposed to go last year, and we have weddings there to go to. But we just decided against it because even up till I believe up till the end of the month, the country still shuts down at 1 o'clock.
Yes. Yep.
And they're looking to open it up to 10:30 p.m. But you know, the fun part of that country is between 10:30 and 1 a.m. anyway. The
Nobody
cafe,
goes to dinner, right?
yeah.
It shuts down at 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
What's
So
the point?
the big problem my cousins are having over there is they're saying like, not only is the country shutting down, like on the weekend, because everybody works from home now, right? But they literally police it where like they will ticket you.
Yeah.
But you have the whole country trying to go food shopping between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. on Saturday and Friday. I'm Saturday and Sunday. So it's like, which is nuts. Like Norway did the opposite, where they opened it up 24 hours, for all supermarkets. So that actually spread out the social distancing. People went at different hours of the day, which actually made it better. So,
Yeah,
but yeah, so that's why we decided not to go this year. But it's a shame because,
it is.
but again, you have to be a citizen to go. But my whole issue is if I go for a couple of weeks and then I want to come home and I test positive over there, then I'm stuck there for another 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So then what's the recommendation? Domestic travel?
Outer Banks.
I'll give you my recommendation, because the other thing, and I'll just kind of finish with, we got the EU, which is still just a big mess, because even if they open up, a lot of people like myself that have been doing this a long time are like, but what's that going to look for the client? What kind of trip is it that they're going to go all the way to, let's say, Rome, if they've never been to Rome before, and 50% of the sites are shut down still?
Right.
Or if they have, like Louisa Center, if they've got certain times you can only go in these facilities and there's lines, like the Vatican line to get in to go see something, and it's just not going to be a good experience. So I'm not excited about Europe opening at all right now, because I still think it's going to be next year before we ever get back to European travel. They're going to do their best to get the word out that they're opening, because they're going to want to see people. But if you've ever, well, in my industry, we know right now that European travel is usually from May until September, October. And if you could really think about it, we're almost to June. Anybody that's ever planned European trips, unless you've got family to go to over there, I would do European planning a year ago for people wanting to go this year. And that's the type of thought you need to put into your European trips, right? So a lot of people in our industry are going, this is all for show. There's no way Europe's coming back this year, because we're already getting close to peak season. So we've already missed the peak season for this year, which segues to the last part I'll talk about, which is cruising. You're going to hear a lot about cruise ships right now. You're going to hear a lot about Alaska cruise seasons coming back. Alaska cruise season starts right now. Again, for people going to Alaska, we would have been planning Alaska cruises a year ago to try to get people to go to Alaska, because it's not something you just hop in your car and fly to Florida or drive to a port, like, go to Cape Liberty and hop on a ship at the last minute. We need to plan people. Where are you going to go? Are you going to go out of Vancouver? Well, nobody's going out of Vancouver right now. Nobody's going out of Canada. So that means Seattle's the only port you can go out of to get to Alaska. And there's only a few ships that have announced they're going to even try to do an Alaska season, because technically, in my mind, Alaska season's gone. We've missed it as well. We were praying Alaska season was going to start in December, so we could have at least 6 months to ramp up to get people booked. But they kept him-hawing and dragging their feet and, arguing with the CDC, and the CDC is not willing to do, whatever. And next thing you know, here we are, we about missed it. So my view, my summation of travel is, if you want to go to Mexico, Punta Cana, Costa Rica, or any of the countries, even if they're requiring testing to get in the Caribbean, you can go. Just always be patient with my overbearing warnings about the repercussions of if something goes wrong, because I'm always going to give my clients the what if. What if you do test positive? What's going to happen? What's that going to look like to you? And people, I've done that with a lot of clients, and they'll still say, you know what, that's okay. We're okay with the risk. We want to go so bad, we're going to go. Or they'll say, we've been vaccinated. We're not worried about the test coming home. So that's giving them the confidence to travel. So we are booking trips now, a lot of trips to Costa Rica, Punta Cana, and Mexico. And that's going to be the saving grace of travel for the next through the summer, basically. But the rest of it's going to probably get pushed off. So, you know, if you want to go to Florida, lots of great places in Florida to go see that'll give you that Caribbean feel that we're going to hopefully get some folks to soon, especially as you get down to the Keys. If you want to do trips you never thought of before, like doing a dude ranch in Montana or going up, you know, the big show Yellowstone got so popular, you can go actually see where they filmed Yellowstone. Now it's a something to actually go tour. And sometimes they're actually going to allow people to stay in that house that Kevin Costner all them used to film. So that's become a hot spot for us is Yellowstone and Bozeman, Montana, because everybody wants to go have a glass of whiskey in those bars and they want to go see, you know, the wildlife from Yellowstone. So
Yeah, I mean, that's what, you know, we've been talking a lot about. Just go do something you wouldn't normally do, right? Like, you know, maybe even Arizona, right? Go to check out Scottsdale. It's beautiful. Palm Springs, go check out the deserts, all these places that you wouldn't normally do, you know? Napa, whatever the case is, you know, and save the, you know, the overseas travel for, I don't know, when things get a little bit easier.
yeah.
Yeah, I have a funny story about Napa.
Uh-oh. All right.
I was supposed to go in 2019 and we had to cancel our trip because of the wildfires.
Oh
Got,
no.
got my credit, booked it for 2020. You know what happened in 2020? So still have that credit.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Forgot about the wildfires. Yeah, poor Napa's been hit with a double whammy 2 years straight.
Yeah. They're in good spirits though. You know, the wine tasting that we had was for the people that did it were from Napa. So they were still in good spirits. They were, you know, those that made it through are doing all right.
Well, third time's a charm, so I'll get there.
Now, what about, I mean, I don't know, Brian, do you see for those, you know, like for those that say, well, I'm never getting vaccinated, right? You know, I mean, do you see these types of, I guess, requirements loosening up at any point?
I do. And it's more of a gut feeling right now because we don't have enough data to show the percentages and what they're predicting with the percentages. But my gut tells me that the reason you're seeing a lot of airline issues right now, airline issues, when I say airline issue, if you plan a trip, let's say 4 months from now, plan on that airline changing your flights at least 6 times in the next 3 to 4 months. In some cases, you may go from the best flight possible. Like it might've been a nonstop flight from Newark to Houston, or I'll even say down to St. Kitts. Cause again, I just had another issue with the client that had been rescheduling to go to St. Kitts or Nevis. And all this, that nonstop flight tomorrow gets canceled and they move you to a connecting flight. Now I'll tell you a story. So my client in Scotch Plains, they've got a credit to go to Nevis to the Four Seasons. So we had planned and they canceled once around the holidays. And then they said, all right, we're going back in June. So we got their trip planned and we were looking at airfare and she's like, I noticed that JFK has a nonstop flight from JFK to St. Kitts. I'm like, great, because nothing from Newark was going to be nonstop. So she was okay with, as you know, anybody in Newark, New Jersey knows how far it is to get to JFK. So she's excited about that. And they book business class because that's the way they usually fly. Well, I get this email like maybe 3-4 weeks after we booked their flight. And I'm looking at the email and it just says flight change. And I'm looking and I'm like, their nonstop flight's gone. Now they moved them to a connecting flight to Miami and then Miami down to St. Kitts. Now, the only reason they were going to JFK was for the nonstop flight, right? We could have booked them on a connecting flight from Newark to go anywhere. She was beside herself. She's like, how do they do that? And I said, it's a sign of the times. Airlines don't have a clue how many people are going to travel from month to month right now. And their forecasting is so off base. So that when they're getting close to now, we're within their forecasting period, they're looking at their flights going, these flights aren't full. We've already lost millions of dollars with nobody traveling for the last year. We can't afford to be flying planes at a loss. And a flight has to travel. My brother-in-law used to be a pilot with Southwest. And he always said the plane has to be over 50% for them to even break even, which is funny because you use 50%, right? So anything over that's a break even and they start to make money. And they can't afford to fly planes at less than 50%. So if a flight is not full within a certain amount of time, they're just canceling the flight. And clients that had single connections are being moved to double connections, and it's just causing a lot of consternation. So to your question, I see the next year being that way. I see the airlines not having a good grasp of what they're doing yet. And for good reasons. I'm not even blaming them. I don't know how I could be in an airline CEO right now and be able to forecast anything to your stockholders, because there's just no way to know. But that tells me that even through the vaccination process, they're not seeing the numbers of people that are still willing to travel to even fill the planes to places in the Caribbean where normally we just have a constant steady flow of travelers going. So long way of answering the question. My gut says that when they start to understand that the unvaccinated versus vaccinated is probably a bigger number than they thought. And if you imagine that, let's say 70% of our country is vaccinated, well, not 70% of our country travels. So you've taken 30% out of the market already. If you say only vaccinated people are going to be able to travel to a certain place, and then take whatever percent of that 70%, and that's your real number that you're using to now spread out amongst every airline, every hotel, every destinations, tours, and et cetera. So I see it as that's what they want for now. But I see them relinquishing that not so far in the distant future, is my guess. Now, you guys are in the financial industry, you do your forecasting for clients. I could be so far off, I could be, who knows, but that's what my gut tells me right now. Any other questions? Did I at least cover enough to give you a feel on where we're at with tourism?
Certainly.
Yes, absolutely. I think
What
it's,
about the national parks? They're open, right?
They are. Yeah, you can go to Yellowstone, you can go to the Grand Tetons, you can come down here, go to the Everglades. You can-
Bryce and Zion and Grand Canyon, that might be a good trip to do.
Yeah, Grand Canyon's definitely open.
Is it like by appointment where you have to like book certain times ahead of time?
I don't think so. In Arizona, I don't think so. I think you can get to the Grand Canyon on the Arizona side just by planning an excursion or
Mm.
driving. I know that some of their lodging around the rim was being cut way back. And who knows, I shouldn't sound so definitive. They may have actually restricted the amount of people that actually got to go down into the canyon on donkey or whatever they were going down on. So, but you can still go to those parks for sure. One other thing I'll point out just to kind of give you an idea. So if you're thinking of trips in the future, these are all the things you have to kind of think about when you're thinking of when and where. The other phenomena that nobody had planned for travel was rental cars. So like coming down to Florida right now, unfortunately, if you're going to rent a car, you're going to pay a gigantic premium, somewhere upwards potentially of $100 to $200 a day.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Which whoever dreamed we would be paying that for a rental car. But forget the per day price. Now we need to be booking rental cars pretty fast because airports have run out. They're not telling people they're running out. I know that when we came back up to Newark for the holidays, we got to Newark's airport, went down to the rental car place, and they checked us in, act like everything was fine. They said, go out there and a guy will help you when you go out towards the car. We got out there and he's like, we don't have any cars. And we're like, how long is it going to be? And he goes, maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour. I'm not sure. And there were so many people sitting there with their luggage. I looked at my wife and I go, we're not getting a car. There's no cars here today. So we luckily, I knew how to finagle a system a little bit. So I was able to get a car that day. But Hawaii, destinations like Hawaii, they have a very fixed amount of inventory on their islands. They can't just say, hey, we need more cars and get a boat to bring more cars over. So in advance, those are places, if you're thinking of going, you need to book well in advance, especially when it comes to even the rental cars. Bozeman, Montana, well in advance. They are running out of rental cars in Bozeman, Montana for the amount of people now that are going to Yellowstone and to Montana to get away and do vacations. So Anthony, we'll talk about Florida when it comes to like flying into Fort Lauderdale, Miami and driving the Keys. We might want to get a rental car sooner than we get anything else just because the inventory is so compact. But
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. Well, that's why, what they say that RVs had their biggest year ever last year, right? And RVs and boats, and the Jersey Shore is having a is going to have a bonker summer this summer. So I mean, those are the vacations that we're seeing at this point.
Yep.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But I'll let me share my screen here for a moment here, right? So we were talking about going to Florida. There's some really cool places in Florida here. Where am I at? This is what Brian's going to be planning for us coming up here. Why can't I do this here?
So Brian, do you think cruises are gonna happen again like normal come October-ish? Like for the Caribbean?
I sure hope so. I mean, I think you know this, Luis. We're entering the off season for Caribbean cruises, right? So you're gonna see a lot of news in the next few weeks about cruises not coming back yet for the Caribbean. But to me, that has nothing to do as much with the pandemic. It has everything to do with they're not willing to ramp up cruising during the slowest part of the year, when cruise lines normally this time of year already shipped a lot of their fleet to Europe, and they ship the rest of their fleet to Alaska, and they only keep a really, really small fleet here in the US for Bahamian cruises and some Caribbean cruises. I think you're going to see that cruises aren't going to come back, to your point, here, especially out of Florida ports, until we get October, November. And my guess is that's when they're really going to start pushing and advertising really that cruises are back, is for that. They're going to try to get that winter cruise season to the Caribbean.
Yeah.
Did I read correctly though? They were Florida. The governor of Florida was kind of pushing back on the ports, because the governor was kind of like, well, we don't want to require vaccines, but the cruise lines were.
He's actually suing.
Yeah, I read something about that, right?
He's suing them because he knows that it's not going to work here in Florida. It's not. He knows that. He knows the cruises aren't going to survive in our ports with that requirement being a requirement. And it goes against the tenor of his state to a certain degree, right? So he's actually suing for them to lessen their requirements. I saw somebody was tweeting today and they were like, I can't believe, the Florida governor is so stupid that he's hurting the cruise industry in Florida. I'm like, and they used the other ports as examples of how other states are being much more receptive to the CDC's requirements. And that's not a true representation. They're using Seattle. Seattle's an Alaskan cruise. So yes, they're going to go back to Alaska before the season is over. But there's no rush in Florida to get the cruises back from now until October or November.
When it actually starts.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
I heard he's cutting the stimulus package next week.
I don't know. My wife is talking something about stimulus package for what? So,
All residents.
so I brought this up, right? So this is something that we're working on. I mean, Andrea, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but this is a pretty cool destination that is domestic. And it's just a couple hours south of where we are now on a little plane ride. So
Nice.
always cool to check it out. It feels like you're kind of in one of those huts in the middle of the water over there in, what is that, in Fiji and in the Polynesian and so on and so forth. So something to consider, something to look at. Brian's working on that for me as we speak. So look, I mean, I there's definitely a lot of options. There's no question about it, and you use this time to do something that you wouldn't normally do, right? Like you said, go visit some sort of monument that you wouldn't necessarily think about, right? If that's the concern, then by all means, go check it out.
We have our country, and I'm probably to blame for this too. In my agency, we don't do a lot of domestic focus, especially when it comes to some of the higher end resorts and things like that. And we have some of the best high end resorts in the world here in our country, and not just in big cities, like Chicago, New York, whatever. You get to some of these places, like even up towards the East Coast, and there are these fantastic sprawling, like turn of the century type resorts that are still 5-star and high end and beautiful and very unique in their stays. And so part of my focus as an agency owner with my agents has been, we need to find those gems again. Because it's not like we can just sit around and go, well, let's wait for Europe to open. Because Europe was 90% of my business at one point of the last 2 years. It used to be Mexico was 50-50. And then I started shifting more to Italy and Europe. And I can't just sit around and wait for Europe to come back. So I kept telling my agents, we need to find these wonderful things that nobody's really thought about, you know, whether it's the all-inclusive Dude Ranch, like I mentioned in Montana, or even those bungalows at Key Largo. And they're on the Isle of Esmeralda is even another type of resort that nobody really thinks about. But that one Anthony just brought up in screen is actually an all-inclusive resort. It's a rarity in our country to get an all-inclusive property. As Louise, you know that. So to see this all-inclusive option, that's a decent all-inclusive option. Club Med used to be the only all-inclusive option we had in America. And it was like one of the first ones way back in like the 80s, a lot of brass and things like that in their decor. And their quality went down the tubes. But this one in Key Largo, the property in Isle of Esmeralda, Dude Ranches, they're all starting to see that there's these travel niches for people that still want to go and have a great time, but they don't want to still worry about where they're going to go out to eat at night. They want the all-inclusive if possible. We're never going to have the all-inclusives like Mexico, Punta Cana, and other places because it's just too expensive here. But, and the prices we would pay for all-inclusive here versus Mexico, people be like, I'm going to Mexico. I'm not going to do that here. But the Key Largo option's great. If you've never been to Key Largo before, it's one of the closest stops once you hit the Keys from Miami. So you're not doing that 5-hour stint drive or so down to all the way to Key West. It's got beaches, which again, Key West doesn't really have very much of. So it's a great option. And we saw in the pictures, I could take those pictures and tell you that was Anguilla, except for maybe the watercolor, and you'd have a hard time disputing me that that was Anguilla until you saw it on the map. So anyway.
So this is awesome. This was good. I'm going to, I just want to share my screen one more time here. I want to bring this up. I'm going to be sending out a follow-up email to all the individuals that were invited on this call. Obviously, like I said before, looks like we had quite a few people that might have no longer been able to make it. But I thought this was great info. I really did. I think I learned a lot. Hopefully, hopefully Brian answered all your questions. If you want to just jot his website down, I think it would be good. Certainly around the bounce questions off of if you have any follow-up questions. And I'm going to be, like I said, I'm going to be sending out this not only your website, but this also recording of this event via email in the next couple of days. So I don't know. I mean, any follow-up questions from anybody? Are we still, did we get did we get everything answered? Did we ease some concerns or did we give you some tips maybe?
Yeah, all my questions were answered. I mean, Brian, you're in the industry, so you know best. But from the way I see it, I mean, I think there's a lot of pent-up demand for travel. So when it does come back, it's going to come back like really, like I think you're going to see airfares shoot up because I already saw that with my trip that I'm trying to rebook to Napa. The airfare is much more than my credit. So,
Andrew, if you don't mind me asking how much, if you don't mind, can you tell me what you're seeing?
My credit was like 425. Now it's 650.
Yeah.
Yep. So right now, right, because people are traveling domestically, but I think, there's a lot of people that want to travel, a lot of vaccinated people like myself that want to travel.
Yeah. Oddly enough, some of the cheaper destinations to fly to are actually here in Florida because they have enough demand that there's enough competition. Southwest actually has announced new routes from places like Kansas City that are nonstop now to Fort Myers. And that's brought in a lot of competition and it's actually kept our airfare for this part of Florida down. But to your point, Andrea, I had clients that wanted to go to St. Lucia, they actually go in St. Lucia in the fall. Now, again, Louise, you all know this is hurricane season from October. October is like the peak for the Caribbean, right? And typically in 17 years, we would have been telling people that's the best time to go for budget because naturally their airfare, hotels, they're wanting you to go. St. Lucia for 2 people from Nashville, it was $1,396 a person. for Coach, almost $1,400.
Wow.
I'd never, in 17 years, I'd never seen that before for Coach. And that actually came down $100 from what it was 2 weeks prior to that, because I was watching it for the client. The client ended up buying it at like $13.96 a person. He's like, is it going to go up or down? I said, let's roll the dice. I have no idea. It just went down. Maybe we should buy it now. And so it's like you guys trying to advise people on buying stock. I don't know how you do what you do. I would have ulcers and all sorts of problems. So
Yeah, it's not easy, you know, and when you watch the prices of airlines, it's like it changes just as rapidly. Like I got to go down to Florida next week for business, right? So I just booked direct on United, and I'm in and out in like 2 days, right? So I swear I looked at it at like 9 o'clock, and then I looked at it at like 11 o'clock, and the prices were significantly different. I'm like, what the hell just happened? Like, and then not only that, I felt like I was getting different flights, and it made no sense to me, but like Andrea says, there's a ton of pent up demand out there. So it's only a matter of time before things start getting really hairy.
Mm.
I know we're prepping for it. I've been fishing a lot, just to utilize my little bit of downtime still that I have, knowing that the downtime is going to go away probably another 2 or 3 months, and we'll be working nonstop. So
Yeah.
Nice.
yeah, and we're ready. We're all ready for it, right? Everybody, if you haven't traveled, you're ready to go. We're ready to book. Everybody's ready to go. So.
Mhm.
Well, that makes for a good rebound in the economy from a travel perspective. So we're looking forward to that for sure. Well, look, this is great. Listen, I know we pegged an hour for the call. I want to be cognizant of time and make sure everybody gets a chance to go get that margarita we were talking about before. And certainly, by no means, I hope you don't have any more Zooms today, Andrea, because I think 8 of them are enough, and I've only had 3, so 3 is good for me for today. But listen, Brian, I appreciate your time. I thank you very much. This was a wealth of knowledge. I'll be sending out all your information to all of our clients. So hopefully you may hear from somebody, and certainly hopefully the travel industry picks up, and by all means, hopefully that for those that are on the call, and then for those that listen to the recording, hopefully we helped ease some of your concerns.